the difference of the parts that we all play in these orchestral pieces is just monumental, and yet you really feel like you're part of a team, don't you?
They're all different, but they're all equally as important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, I'm Sarah,
And I'm Alexander.
and we're currently in the concert hall at the Warwick Arts Centre speaking with Andrew Gourlay, the residency conductor.
Andrew, so how did you find your way from playing into conducting?
Everyone has a different route into conducting, and for me it really came from the orchestral world. So I'd been learning the piano to some extent. I decided I was never going to be a soloist on the piano, but I loved playing it. And ended up focusing more on the trombone, which, of course, as an orchestral instrument to view conductors from is just ideal. I mean, it's a glorious instrument in that you get all of the special moments of some of the biggest pieces of music, but you also then find that you're used quite spartanly, and so you've got a lot of time to really analyse what conductors are doing. And I just became, intrigued by these people in front of me. It's fair to say also you sort of notice their flaws. We all analyse. I'm sure you're both critiquing me as I'm going along. It's just something which we have to do as musicians. And so I just gradually and quite organically phased out my playing and phased in my conducting, really.
And does the way that you view the score change because of the fact you were a trombone player, or is it fairly unbiased?
I think it did at the start. It is fair to say that the first years of conducting, I viewed pieces that I already knew very much from a brass player's point of view. Because, you don't forget, where you're both sitting in the orchestra, on the piano in a real distance away from the conductor, in the horn section, again, big distance away, you hear this world around you more prominently than the rest of the orchestra. And I think, as a trombonist, it was the same for me. So there are certain features of famous pieces which you think you know intimately from an audience point of view. And actually it isn't always the case. So you do, by studying the full picture of the score, I think, learn these pieces in a different way. It also means if I'm studying something for the first time, then I see it much more as an outsider rather than as a brass player.
Yeah, definitely. These pieces that we're doing are quite rarely played, and does this excite you just because it's something different?
Yeah, I mean apart from the Rachmaninoff, of course, the first two pieces that we're playing, this very new piece by Tom Adès, Dawn, I love picking up new scores that most of the world hasn't yet seen. There's something so exciting about that. So I'm also excited by the fact that for Tom Adès, it's quite a departure, I think, from a lot of the rest of the music that he writes. There's a real slow-paced, timeless simplicity to it, which is just sensational, I think, the end result. And what I'm particularly excited about that, we've got all of us dotted around this space, huge distances to conduct from, and it works because he's created it in such a sensitive way. So that's a first experience of the piece that I'm really looking forward to in concert. And Gabriela Elena Frank's Latin American dances, there's all the West Side Story connection that she has with these pieces, but also I feel a real empathy with them, I think, just simply because I've traveled a lot in Hispanic countries and worked with Hispanic orchestras in South America as well, where a lot of these dancers come from. For example, I've worked with the Colombian Youth Orchestra, and if you put some of these dancers in front of the Colombian Youth Orchestra, it's absolutely home territory for them. So it's fantastic to bring this kind of music to a British youth orchestra and try and inject a bit of that pizzazz into it. How are you both finding that music? Does it feel natural to you both or not?
Definitely not natural. I think jumping from the Rachmaninoff into the Lena Frank is quite change, and you have to really adapt your playing.
Yeah, but it's quite fun to sort of explore this new sort of realm of playing with all these different rhythms and obviously different soundscapes.
It's a really tough piano part as well, isn't it? I mean, when you think of like those great salsa pianists, for example, I mean, the skill that they have, it's a lifetime of learning those particular styles, isn't it? And so a lot of these riffs that you're having to play in the piano really come from, you know, decades and decades of musical journeys. So it must be quite awkward to just suddenly plunge into it.
Yeah, you've got to immerse yourself in sort of the whole world of it and try and internalize, I guess, the rhythms, but also the harmonies and yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's working. It's working really nicely. I mean, similarly on the horn, I think the way that you play this kind of Latin music is totally different.
Yeah.
From playing big, noble Rachmaninoff sounds. And what I love is that so many of you can really do that. I mean, we've got so many brass players here who do a lot of jazz playing, for example. You can hear in the breaks they're all playing jazz. And yet they're able to switch into a really beautiful classical symphonic sound. So I think if we can really nail in a concert being able to switch from one to the other, then it's going to be something really quite special.
Yeah, definitely.
How do you establish your interpretation of these pieces, especially as some of these are not very well known?
I mean, with new pieces of music, and I'm talking brand new, there's, to be honest, this wonderful weight off my shoulders in terms of the responsibility of thinking back over years of tradition, because you can approach things completely afresh and simply, it's like going back and using old-fashioned detective techniques rather than modern ones. So you're using all of the evidence on the score and you're trying to ascertain exactly what the composer would have wanted, and then bringing your own experience to work out the best way to make that work and make it sing in a concert. With Tom's new piece, you know, it's only been performed a couple of times, and he's still been revising it until quite recently, and he's settling on his desired interpretation of it. And so just experiencing the journey that he's going on with a piece like that is really something special. I mean, we just have to, I think, serve the composers, don't we? I mean, I used to find it so frustrating if I was sitting in an orchestra and I felt that a conductor had come up in front of me who just wanted to make their mark on a piece for their sake. And I think music speaks best when you feel like the conductor is really just transmitting what the composer wanted. We won't always know. I mean, I'd love to go back and write letters to Rachmaninoff, or, you know, even more so, go back to some of the old Baroque composers and write letters to them. It's just not possible, is it?
And the theme of NYO this year is all about opening up orchestral music to more people. And how's this relevant in your work, and how do you think you can establish that change?
I mean, the whole issue of young people in classical music has always been a bit of a taboo subject, hasn't it? Well, actually, taboo is the wrong word, because people love to talk about it in the same way that they like to talk about the other end of the spectrum and say classical audiences are all old. And I mean, I just think so much of it is a complete myth, because all classical musicians have always started young, haven't they? I mean, when did you both start learning your first instruments?
I started piano when I was 6. I think.
6.
Piano when I was 6.
6 as well. And I was piano when I was 6 or 7 as well. So, I mean, and I'm sure that has been happening for centuries. It's a constant in the world of classical music. And the fact that audiences have been aging is really no surprise when you think of the fact that the whole world is aging. People are retiring many, many years later. Of course, audiences at classical concerts are going to get progressively older until it reaches a certain point. So, in terms of youth players, I think we shouldn't think of it as a desperate need to get children involved in classical music because the art form is dying away, because it's not. It's just a constant struggle to connect with as many people as possible. I think the bigger danger is that access to classical music is really lost in a lot of the world now. I mean, I was so lucky as a child to have really, really strong musical influences at my different schools, just dotted around the world that I went to. And it's just critical, isn't it? I mean, what did you both have in your schools which got you, not just from your instrumental background, but got you interested in orchestral music?
I mean, my primary school had an orchestra, so that in itself, we had 3 horn players.
I don't believe, really, that's
yeah.
fantastic.
And so we had a horn teacher there, who was also sort of the local one. So I think just from that, to be in an orchestra from the beginning of your instrument, just on a Wednesday morning before school.
And did this teacher sort of steer you into any orchestral things outside school as well?
Yeah, she was my first teacher, and that got to a point where she was like, you must go to a junior conservatoire now, and like, you must experience like all of this music that sort of awaits.
I mean, these influences are just massively important. It was the same for me. I remember a teacher at my school suggesting for the first time that I went and auditioned for my county youth orchestra. The thought had never crossed my mind. And if that hadn't happened, I'm sure I would have still been playing music, but I might not have got sucked into anything that I'm doing now. How about you, Alexander?
Yeah, I mean, obviously our school, they made us take brass lessons as well as the choir. So I think all of these different influences, no matter what sort of music it is or what instrument it's on, it inspires you. Definitely.
Yeah, I think so. Because I mean, there aren't so many pianists that end up in the orchestral world at a school level, you know. And so that journey, I think, is really critical.
So what do you think are some of the most inspirational moments from maybe, from your entire life?
Musically?
Any.
Wow, that's a big question. In terms of wider influences, I think I've just said a general point. I mean, I've been so privileged to be able to travel the world constantly from literally as a baby, moving country when I was, a month old. Going from beaches to tropical countries to cold climates. I've sort of had everything and been able to explore different parts of the world through my work as well. And that's probably my greatest passion in life, is just the world around us. And yeah, I want to spend more time outdoors as I get older. I think that's a really important thing. I want to know about you both as well, because you must have had some really inspirational moments to get you into an orchestra like this.
Yeah, I think definitely the first time playing in an orchestra, even though it was just a small string orchestra, everything feels alive at that point, and it still feels that way. Even the first tutti rehearsal we had in this residency, everything just fit together, and it sort of felt amazing to know that you're a part of sort of this energy that's happening.
It's key, that, isn't it? Because that's probably what gets people hooked into orchestral music, is the fact that, in a lot of team sports and other group activities, everyone's doing quite similar things. I mean, the difference of the parts that we all play in these orchestral pieces is just monumental, and yet you really feel like you're part of a team, don't you?
They're all different, but they're all equally as important.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you, Sarah?
I can't pinpoint a specific moment, but I think with any orchestral course I did, just the progress that you make from day one to the concert day, every time I was just amazed that could even happen.
Do you feel like we're doing that this week?
Yes, definitely. I think especially because 2 of the pieces were so unfamiliar with most people, it gave a lot of space for us to sort of explore and learn a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the nice thing. We've got 2 pieces which are fairly unfamiliar to most, which I can really, work hard to get us through the week. And then we've got another big piece in the Rachmaninoff Symphonic Dances, which I feel like I have a lot to share with, because it's been with me for a long time. And I can bring a few tricks from over the years. So yeah, I'm glad you're seeing some progress anyway. But you never quite know, do you, what's going to happen in the concert? And I do love that. You know, you're always looking for that perfect tick up at the end.
Yeah.
And it can happen in so many different ways. And things will always happen that you never expected, for good and for bad. So yeah, I can't wait for the concert.
Andrew, so as the theme of this concert is about dance and letting loose, what do you want the audience to take away from the performance?
I think we've got a great opportunity to really connect directly into a lot of audience members that won't necessarily have seen this kind of immersive experience that we're offering them. You know, they'll perhaps be expecting a quite simple program of a few pieces. But what's so wonderful here is that we've got some spoken word interspersed, some smaller performances, and then all of the instruments dotted around at the start of the concert won't ruin the surprise, but you know, it's really drawing them in. I think it's just so vital because, you know, when we're players, we feel this massive energy on stage, don't we? And you're aware of it like nothing else really that you do in your life. It's what keeps us doing it, is the buzz of everything going on around us. But that doesn't always transmit to the audience, and I think it's so critical that we find ways of bringing them in. I mean, I sometimes do it in the way that I pace things, for example, and in silences. And you know, if you can really feel that you've reached a point where the tension is heightened in the room, and then you can freeze there for a little bit and just feel that you've still got the audience with you, and then navigate your way onwards, you can control people in a surprisingly powerful way. But I mean, I suppose you probably both feel the same, that from where you are, the energy is tremendous. So are you consciously thinking about playing to the audience as you're performing?
I think it's, with the horn, it's quite funny when you're sort of performing backwards. If there are people sitting in the stalls, I feel like I'm playing directly to them, quite literally. But I think because I play in more concerts than I watch, when I do watch one, I remember I was at the Proms watching Mahler 5, and I think it was the first concert I've been to since COVID started, and you just have that realisation of the impact that you get from the audience as well, and then I took that into the impact that I'm trying to make them feel.
You're so right. I've absolutely longed to be back in front of audiences through the pandemic, and you know, I feel the same not only in COVID times, but before, when you're doing live broadcasts, an unforgiving experience in a studio without an audience, and so everyone's just, you've got all these players, but everyone's just in total silence, statically waiting for a red light to turn on in the room, and then you begin. It's not the same kind of music making that I feel as useful as it is and important. It's not the same experience as having an audience with you, with their little noises and their sighs and their sort of appreciation and all of that. It's part of our experience. Alexander?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's so nice to sort of be able to play and also be in an audience. I think it's something that often pianists, we don't really appreciate, because often we play to ourselves, but really, we should all really be working on sort of trying to not only communicate to the audience, but to try and bring them into our own world.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. We've got to keep working at that.
Yeah, it's been lovely talking to you. Just as a last question, a slightly less philosophical one perhaps, what's your pre-concert ritual?
Pre-concert ritual. I don't like to really, hectically drum any of the music into me. I'll probably just be thinking at that stage about the start of the concert and how I want to set the right mood for the first piece. Because, like everything, once you're into a bit of a flow, then you've done the work by that stage. But the concert intensity, could say nerves, but I mean that's just part of our world, isn't it? The intensity of the start of a concert can affect the way that you conduct something. You might have a slightly faster heartbeat. You might just be excited and take something in a slightly different tempo. It might have a different character. So I'm trying to remember what we've rehearsed and just think about that. And then I tend to get changed pretty late because I don't want to just be pacing back and forth in a concert suite. Yeah, I don't have a particular ritual, I don't think. I just try and remain positive. I've seen others who do all sorts of things, and touching different parts of their bodies. And there's one gentleman who shall go nameless who just loved, performing concertos with him, and he's just about to walk out on stage, just downs a sachet of sugar, for example. We've got all these different things. I suppose I'm a little more dull in my pre-concert preparations. So, you two, do you probably have specific warm-ups that you do on the horn, I'd imagine?
Yeah, a lot of breathing exercises and warm-ups. But I also have coconut water, which I think helps so much. Like when you're nervous and your mouth gets really dry. This is more with if there's a big moment that I know that I'll get nervous for. Coconut water stops that happening, and my teacher swears by it.
No.
It really
That's
works.
amazing.
And I thought that it was a bit of a myth until I did a performance without it, because I couldn't find any, and it was just so much worse.
Oh, that's the danger, though. I mean, I had teachers who told me I should eat lots of bananas, and friends who said I should eat lots of bananas before nerve-wracking things because of the beta-blocking properties and all this kind of stuff. But then if one day you turn up to something and you don't have a banana, then you can go through some real psychological problems there. So it's using these things in moderation and knowing that they can help you.
Yeah.
That's a new one to me. I must
really good.
must check it out. How about you, Alexander? So you're trying to warm up the fingers, are you?
Yeah, obviously, I think since there's rarely any pianos backstage, oftentimes you're trying to prepare yourself mentally, but also make sure you're physically sort of in tune with everything. So yeah, I like listening to music, not necessarily the piece, but stuff that gets me in the mood. So maybe for this piece, I might listen to maybe the start of the Firebird.
Oh yes, that's a lovely idea.
For Dawn, maybe I guess the start of Appalachian Spring.
I love that. So you're listening to something that gets you in the right kind of frame of mind, but doesn't lose the freshness of the piece itself.
Yeah.
And I'd never thought about the fact that as orchestral pianists, you don't have the same access to pianos backstage that the soloists do when they're playing a concerto and they've got a dressing room with the Steinway. And how interesting. Yeah, you see, these are all the things. We're all in our separate places. The one thing I love about pre-concert as a conductor is, to be totally blunt, having my own space. I find it such a transformation. When I was a player, I used to struggle occasionally with getting myself into the zone if I had something important to play with a whole orchestra just bustling around me. So that's a luxury these days.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. It's been lovely.
Thank you so much.
Great pleasure. Nice talking to you both.
Nice to talk to you as well.